Sir Mike Penning to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased you pronounced it rather than me. So from now on, perhaps we'll just use FOP, which is what most people, including the families, but the scientists don't. FOP is a genetic condition. It's not an illness, it's not a disease. All too often when this very rare condition is talked about, and it is very rare, 1 in a million. So in this country we have about 70 odd people alive that have FOP, and around about 30 young people and children. So if we replicate that around the world, it's a very rare condition. The condition is probably the biggest nightmare for any parents, anybody that loves a child. Let's give an example. If you bruise, I played rugby, I bruised very regularly. I stopped playing fairly recently, but when I did play rugby, I would bruise. If you have FOP, there's a good chance that that bruise will turn to bone. Skeletally, it will turn to bone. If you have an injection, most of us want our young children to be inoculated. We've been going through an inoculation process, which I was very much involved with in COVID. There's a good chance that that trauma will turn to bone. And I've circulated privately with the Minister on the front bench, including Mr. Deputy Speaker's chair and others, some photographs of what this trauma can end up like and what it does end like. And I got involved in this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when a couple came to see me in my constituency and said, look, and I can't, even this day as a dyslexic person, I've practiced and practiced, I can't do it. My daughter has got FOP. I had no idea what they were talking about. It's a bit like the previous debate. When we first heard about Primidos and the problems with Primidos, most of us in this room had never heard of it. FOP is much rarer than the conditions we've been talking about, the victims of Primidos, or MESH, or Valparate, or any of those. But the effects on that individual and their family and loved ones is so profound that very often, when, as my constituent said to me, as a mum, she looked at her baby and she thought there was something wrong with her toes. The initial diagnosis from most paediatricians on that would be bunions. Bunions on a newborn baby. My wife's got bunions, but it's nothing to do with what she was born with. It's the quality of the shoes and things that she was wearing as a young lady. She won't mind me saying that because we've discussed this case before. And it's only sometimes if you can get in front of the right expert, you can get the diagnosis that you need for an incurable condition, completely incurable, progressive condition, that maybe you might find out what you've had. And that's the situation that happened with my constituents. There are 3 consultants in this country that have that capability, and they were lucky that they got in front of one, and I pay tribute to the Portland Hospital where the diagnosis took place. So what does this mean as a young person? And there's people in the gallery this evening which I talk about as young people that have the condition, as well as, I think the little one's gone home now because I think she was rather tired, and she helped me deliver a letter to the Prime Minister at number 10 earlier on today. And what does it mean? It means that your whole life is difficult in that, do we want to wrap our children up in cotton wool? No, of course we don't. But even if they've got FOP, do we want to wrap them up in cotton wool? No, we don't. But you have to be extremely careful about inoculations, bruising, sport, rough and tumble. My constituents are very, very lucky. I have a very forward-thinking planning department in my local authority that use the delegated powers that they had to grant planning concession on green belt that I fight to protect in my constituency, so a specialist house could be built for Lexi, so that she has the facilities where she can have the safe upbringing that she needs. Now, there were lots of people that were very worried about with permission being given in that sort of way, because the condition is so rare. I had people saying to me, are you really sure this baby's got this condition? Are they not just circumventing the planning? And it's only when I circulated some of the photographs, which many of colleagues have got in the house today, that people actually said to me, okay, we're actually, two of them said, we're really sorry, we get this. But because it's not visual, very often in the early stages, there is no understanding of, it's a bit like mental health condition. We've got much better ideas about mental health these days, but because when you walk up to someone, you don't know that they've got mental health. Well, a lot of you would not go up, if you went up to Lexi today, you would not know that she's got FOP, but you will do in the next few years. It's pretty obvious. The interesting thing about FOP, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is there is no set planned rule for it. In some progression, it progresses very fast, and the bone grows very quickly, and the effects on the skeleton and movement and mobility is very quick. And in others, you get short bursts of it. And then sometimes you have nothing for years, and then it will progress again. Now, the reason for this debate, and I apologise to the Minister because I spoke to him privately about this, I didn't want him on that bench. I wanted the Science Minister on the bench, and it's nothing personal, but this is not an NHS issue. It's a condition that needs scientific expertise in research and in trials, which is actually a Science Minister's portfolio. And I understand, as soon as we start talking about anything to do with health, the Health Department go, that's ours. Well, on this particular case, it's not. I'll give way and then I'll make some comments.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and can I just say that I concur with his comments about this issue of research and health research, and there is a concern about how it's being handled. Thank you.
I thank the honourable lady for that intervention. Now, earlier on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we did have a short statement on Horizon, which was excellent because the Science Minister was on the bench, and I asked the Secretary of State a few questions around FOP, and of course he's agreed to meet us in short time. So the great news is we will meet the Science Minister. The key to what was announced earlier on is that before COVID, there was work being done, and there is work being done around the world on FOP, but there was funding from Horizon for trials on FOP. The big issue was COVID that interrupted the trials. It wasn't actually us leaving the EU, which I'm sure some colleagues will say, oh, that's what it's all about. No, it was nothing to do with that. It was actually COVID which actually affected it. So I'll put that on the record straight away. And now we have a great situation that Horizon is back on stream. But one of the reasons I would like to ask the Science Minister this question, perhaps the Minister's colleagues in his office can elaborate on this before I meet the Science Minister, is that the trials got halted because of COVID. Have we got to start from scratch again, or can we actually, in the trials terms, move on? Now, as I'm an old-fashioned, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I used to be called a Eurosceptic. We're now out of the European Union, so that's great. And of course, one of the things that they said, well, you don't want to cooperate with Europe. Of course we want to cooperate with Europe. And the announcement today on the Horizon is a classic example. And a classic example of why we would have to collaborate, not just with Europe, but with America and other parts of the world, is because this condition is so rare. We could not do trials here. The scientists in America have got a much bigger base to it to be able to do trials. But actually, we need to learn from them and they need to learn from us. So it looks very sensible that we're going to be back in the European trials one, but what I'm petrified about is have we got to wait for Horizon to announce bidding on a certain part of the scientific research and then wait for a couple of years for that decision to be made, because that tends to happen with these projects, when we've already been in the middle of the project and in the middle of it already. In trying to work out what will be the best route forward, and I'm not a scientist, I'm a dad looking at this, if you know what I mean, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We need two things. There is research going on out there into how we prevent the progression of FOP and the bone structure within this in the traumas? And actually, is there something we can turn off very early on? Is there research out there that can predict that you might actually... At the moment, there isn't, I understand. So we've got two sets of situations here. You've got, can we in some way look at the future and to, if anybody family-wise or genetically is likely to get this. This is a genetic issue. And then if we have then got it in a child, and then how can we slow down that progression? The families that are here with me today and the families of the friends of FOP would argue that they've got it, so they need help and the research now, but we also, and I know that they would like, what we need to do is have the research to actually prevent what's going on genetically. What worries me also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that while we need to spread knowledge around the world, not just in this country about FOP, because there are some parts of the world where there is almost no FOP babies being born. Just on the law of averages, that's not possible, and they've already proven that there is no cultural link. I mean, some genetic conditions are from what part of the world you might have come from. Apparently they've already done the research on this, that is not the case. So what is happening in parts of the world where babies, and as I said earlier on, they're not born deformed. So there's, I'm not saying that, you know, they instantly you know what's going on. So what is happening? And that sort of research desperately needs to be done. There's lots of work being done in Boston. There's lots of work being done around the world. But I think the key to this again now will be, we're back in as an associate of Horizon. Can we start not from scratch, but halfway through where we was before COVID hit the project? In a perfect world, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we would like, and the families would like, well, we would all like in this room, to be able to press a button, perhaps give a tablet, and stop this progression. It is the most awful thing to be sitting there waiting for your child to perhaps have a bump or a bruise or a progression in this. Because as a group, and friends of FOP make sure that everybody talks to everybody, because it's better learning from other people that are in the same situation as you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every 5 minutes. As I said earlier on, you're desperate not to wrap your child in cotton wool, to give them as much of a normal life as possible. And I was only talking earlier on with the chair of the Friends of the FOP, who's playing badminton, his son has got FOP. I think he loses on a regular basis. So these things can be done, but as I say, the problem with the condition is it's not the same in every child. It's going to be different in every child, and it's different in its progression. So that's why this debate was so important. I thank the Backbench Business Committee for guiding the debate. It would not be a normal sort of debate to be had. We've had a debate in Westminster Hall about this on the floor of the House, but it has such a dramatic effect on the lives and the futures and the aspirations and dreams of the families with FOP affecting their lives. I thought, and colleagues thought, some of them couldn't be here today, that we should bring it to the floor of the House so we could find out where this research is going. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Question is, as on the order paper. Liz Twist.